Hi, this is Andy of Andy's Personal Development, and we are currently live in the breakout room. So, welcome, and we love being here for you with quality and value to inspire and to transform. Remember, we are on Apple, Spotify, Google, Amazon, and iTunes. Today, as usual, we have a special guest to share with you for your development and growth and to live your better informed life. So, grab a cup, pull up a seat, and stay tuned for the introduction right here, now, live in the breakout room. Hi, guys, this is Andy of Andy's Personal Development. Our next guest live in the breakout room, Brian L. Arnold, the founder and CEO of Kingdom Problem Solvers LLC. Brian is an author and lecturer. He has been teaching, writing, and counseling thousands of men and women all over the world for over a quarter century. This is the man of the moment. He has a novel entitled How to Win the War Within and Discover Your Purpose for Living. This is his publication. So, let's welcome live in the breakout room our guest, Brian Arnold. And here we are live in the breakout room. This is Andy welcoming our guest, Brian Arnold. How are you, Brian?
I'm totally awesome, Andy. Thank you for asking.
Good. That sounds positive. That sounds great. How are things in Vegas?
Things in Vegas are wonderful. It's 70 degrees, and I've been out in the sunshine and by the pool, and things are going good, and I'm happy. Yeah, it's great.
Wow.
Yes,
sounds
sir.
Wonderful. Thank God for that.
Yes.
Thank God for that.
Yes.
Indeed. You know, there's a saying,
yes.
right? What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas.
Oh, yeah.
We need for you to share some good stuff from Vegas on the show. We're gonna change that a little bit. Hope folks don't mind. Hope folks don't mind.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Yeah, Brian, thank you for coming on. Thank you for taking the time for being with us and our listeners live here in the breakout room on Andy's Personal Development. First of all, we would like to know, I'm curious, and I know my tribe, my listeners will be very curious as well. Who was Brian Arnold way before he got involved in making millions of dollars? Could you remember what things were like before you entered college and stuff?
Well, it's interesting because I never did enter college.
Wow.
I've got a grade 8 education, but I made but we made nearly $40 million before I was 24. And 4 million of that went into my pocket as a little piece of the action. But I'll back up a little bit, Andy, to the beginning. I'm very fortunate that I was even born. I was a hot night out, I guess, and my mother got pregnant and had me, but I never met my father. And I found out I was born and raised in northern Canada, and I was adopted out. And my mother and father that adopted me were actually my aunt and uncle within the family. So I was adopted within the family. And my father was a fur trader with the Indians back in the 1940s and 50s. I was born in 1950. And so it was a very interesting upbringing. I was brought up really solid. I was grounded. I was living in the bush. We were among the Indian people. I'm quarter Cree Indian myself. And my father had a dog team. We had 11 dogs, and we run in the wintertime about 300 miles through the snow, 40 below zero in northern Canada. And my father was buying fish and fur, like beaver, mink, wolves, all that stuff back in that day. And so that's how I was raised. When I was 6 years old, my father sold everything. He was kind of an entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm.
But it was, there's not very many people up there. It's cold. It's 40 below zero. There's maybe a few thousand people in the whole area. Not very many people in that area where I lived, mostly all native people. And so I had a very good, solid, basic life and upbringing.
Okay.
Then my father sold everything and we bought this little quarter section, which is 160 acres of land. And that sounds like a lot of land, but back in that day, that wasn't very much. And we cut down the trees and trimmed them up and built a log home. And then my father bought about 30 head of cows. So we had 30 head of cattle. We had about 60 hogs, and I started trapping at 6 years old.
Okay.
Had my own little trap line, and so I quickly grew up, though, and I by the age of 9, I had worked a whole summer for my father. He gave me a Hereford bull calf, and I took this bull calf and traded it for a horse. So I had a big horse, and I learned how to break that horse and trained it and started a trap line that was 7 miles long when I was a little kid. So I started to make some pretty good money. And by the age of 16, I wanted to get away. I wanted to go out into the world and find out what the world was about. So I bought a car and I left home and I got my grade 8 education. I started into grade 9, but I wanted to go to work on the oil rigs out there where it was really cold. So I left home at an early age, 16. And I went out into the world and started working. And I went to work with 4 alcoholics. And these 4 guys were alcoholics that they worked the oil rig, but every night when we were done at 4 o'clock, by 5 o'clock, we will have drank a 26 to a 40 ounce of whiskey.
Wow.
And so I was starting to go down the wrong road real quick at 16, 17. I wasn't even supposed to be working on the rigs. Now these guys are saying, kid, we're going to make you a man. We're going to teach you how to be a man. So I started drinking very young. And then I got into the drugs. And not heavy into the drugs, but enough that I got caught once and they threw me in jail. And so I went to prison just for a little short time, 3 months. I was only in jail about 1 month, and the guard said, this guy's the hardest worker I've ever seen, because I knew how to work hard.
Okay.
He said, this young kid doesn't belong here. Get him out of here. And when I walked away from prison that day, I turned around and I made a declaration. And I looked at that prison and I said, I will never go back to prison again, ever. That's it for me. I never said I would be a good person. I said, I'm not going back to prison. So I didn't know any better back then. I was just kind of a wild young kid, but I was well brought up. I respected my parents and I respected other people. Although I was a fighter and a scrapper, I was in 31 fights with 31 knockouts, and I had a bit of a reputation, and I was a collector. I started collecting money for people. I'm just a smaller guy, but I was very tough.
Okay. And
then life went on, and suddenly I got involved with Mafia. And I didn't know it was mob that I was involved with. But what happened one night, I was invited to a party. I was 19 years old now. I'm invited to this party, and I'm working in the bars. And I'm drinking in the bars, and I'm working in the bars. And I go ahead and I'm at this party, and this guy comes out of the back room, and he come over and he saw me, and I had served him and his partner that night at the bar where I was at, and they had invited me to this party. And I went there, and in the back room was a poker game going on. And this guy comes out to me, and he says to me, he says, hey kid. He called him, that was my nickname after, was the kid.
Okay.
He said, hey, kid, how would you like to make $500 tonight in an hour or two just sitting at the table? I said, how am I going to do that? I mean, what do I got? He said, never mind. here's $5,000. We want you to sit in the game. We have other guys in there, and we're going to take all the money. We're going to control the game completely, and we're going to dump all the money on you. Just know that it's not your money. It's our money. We are taking control, but we don't want the heat. We're going to dump the money onto you.
Wow.
I don't know how this is going to work, right? So they gave me two signals. They said when we're dealing, this is private game, a private home at a party. But it was a very sophisticated system. They said if we put our finger like this when we're dealing, means bet and shoot the pot. Whatever amount is in there. If there's $50,000 in there, go for the whole works, because you're going to win it. We're going to dump it onto you. And if we go like this, means don't hit it or don't take a card. So there was only two signals, this or this. That was it. So depending, so that night we win, I don't know, maybe $20,000, something like that. And so I have to give it all to them, and they give me $500. The next night, they said, you want to come back and play again? We like you sitting in the game where you don't do nothing. You just sit there. We dump the money on you. And they had a couple of hookers, prostitutes, that were bringing these guys that were millionaires to the games. So the games were private games, but the millionaires were sitting at the table. They were pulling the money out of those guys. Even if they didn't have much money back then, it was all checks.
Yeah.
So they would write a check for $5,000, $10,000, and I would be the one loaning it, because I was the one that was going to come and collect it if they didn't pay. So I could go to the bank the next morning and at 10 o'clock, and I would cash all these checks, and sometimes up to $400,000 one night with one play.
Wow.
And we won over $500,000 many times in a night. And when then all of a sudden we get a call one day. The one fella, his name is Pete. They're all gone now. There was only 6 of us, and then I became the 7th.
Yeah.
But there was 6 of them, and I was the kid. There was nobody else. It was the old school way of taking all the money, and nobody would ever catch you. If they did catch you, they kill you right there on the spot. You're shot dead. But otherwise, you're not going to jail. And that's what I had declared. I'm not going to jail. Anything I do, I wasn't going to jail for drugs again. I wasn't going to jail for robbing a bank. I wasn't going to jail for nothing. But if I could make all this money and learn how to do this, what these guys were doing, they could sit in a game. I can now shuffle the cards. I haven't played in 45 years now, because I straightened my life up. And this is a little bit of the story of how I got into Mafia, and then how I got out of the Mafia. Mm-hmm. And I know I've shared quite a bit here with you already, but you may have some other questions you want to ask me.
Wow.
But I'm just bringing you up to the Mafia, to how I got into the Mafia part, and I can share with you a little later if you want, with how I got out of it and so on too. So
that'd be very.
That's part of my.
Man, that was fascinating. You have a whole book, a whole movie in that time you took there to share that information with us. But Brian, what kind of lessons, life lessons, you would have learned while experiencing this Mafia scenario and making that pledge that you would never ever go to jail again? What kind of life lessons would you have learned out of that experience?
Many. For example, I learned the art of being able to walk into a city and not know anybody, and within 48 to 72 hours walk out of that city with at least $50,000 to $100,000 in my pocket. Wow. And not know anybody. So you had to go in and have personal skills where you could walk into a lounge. You could walk into any place, sit down, start to talk, put on a conversation going, find out, no, those guys aren't going to go. They're not going to work. Yeah, and read these people over here. And you know what? There's a live wire over there, and there's a couple of girls over here I could talk to, and I give them 10% of all the action that they bring. And there was many things that you could do to set up a whole operation very quickly and make a lot of money, but it was gambling, but it wasn't gambling. I was a trained professional that could go sit down and take all the money by doing anything I want with a deck of cards. Okay. So, and you had to be so good that you couldn't get caught. Now, here's the lesson. When I always say practice. If you're going to be in sales or your listening audience right now, whatever they're doing in life, if they practice develops competence, and competence creates confidence, and confidence sells.
Right.
So you need to get good at what you're doing. I had to be so good at what I was doing, I could get killed in a moment if I didn't do it right. So when I was practicing with the cards and I had to pull a card out, like I don't have a deck of cards with me now. I've made decks of cards, custom built decks of cards that were going into prisons and stuff with scripture on them to change and transform lives. But I can take a deck of cards and right in front of you like this, I can have the card on the top of the deck here. Let's say it's an ace, but I don't want to give you the ace. I might want to give you a 6. So I go like that and I give you the 6 right in front of you like this. Here's your card. But it didn't come from the top. It came from second or third or fourth from the top, right in front of you. And it had to be so good that if you saw me do something like that, you pull out a gun and go bang, you're dead. That's how good you got to be at doing that. So that's how sharp and good we can be in the positive rather than the negative. That was a negative way of growing my life, was going down the wrong road. And as I went down the wrong road, because there's 2 roads in life, there's always a good right and a wrong road. And I actually have broken those down now, Andy, into what I call 2 kingdoms. A kingdom of darkness and a kingdom of light. Not religion. I don't talk religion. I'm not a religious person, but I love the Lord and it transformed my life. I came out of the kingdom of darkness. I came out of the kingdom of darkness and I crossed over into the kingdom of light. You have to come by way of the cross. For me, that's how I did it. But just to back up a little bit, Andy, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Okay, so what I learned, Andy, was I fell into depression. I had made all this money, and I moved from $500 a night to suddenly, I threatened a guy. One night we were drinking and I threatened him I was going to chop his thumb off if he didn't show me and tell me now how they did this. I wanted to know how to read the cards. I wanted to know how to pull a card. I wanted to know the tricks and the secret of that trade that these guys were doing. And I threatened him and he told me and he showed me. And I thought I was really, this is the greatest thing since sliced bread. And it was, because at 19, 20 to 24, you're young, wild, crazy. I was doing drugs. I was just, and I made millions and millions and millions of dollars. And we got started involved with the Mafia. They would contact Pete and they'd say, okay, we need you to fly in. We go into Chicago or New York or whatever city, and they would fly us into there with their own Learjet, pick us up at the airport. We'd stay in a 5-star resort hotel. Then that evening, we'd have a sit down, and they'd say, okay, here's the deal. Here's what's going down. There's going to be 3 guys at the table. All 3 of them are millionaires, but that one guy, his name is Jack. He's a big player, and he's got millions of dollars, because we wouldn't even come unless there was at least $500,000 on the table. Wow. So when we would come into the game, there was big money there. The mob would take their half. We took our half and split it 3 ways. What they did with their stuff, we didn't know, and I didn't want to know. So I never knew these guys. We were just kind of like a hitman that came in and did a hit with the cards. We didn't do a gun. We did the cards. They had the guns. So as I was learning things and my life began to, it went up and peaked, Then it started to go down. When I was about 24, I started to fall into depression, and I didn't know where this depression was coming from. And I was going, is this all there is to life? Is just go and sit in games and take all this money? And then there's no purpose. There's no, my talents and my giftings were being used and honed and refined, but in the wrong way. Today, they're refined in a good way, and I'll share that in a little bit. But back then, I was refined, but in the wrong direction. And so depression came. And then suicidal thoughts came. And I was trying to figure out where this was coming from. And I had 5 major questions. Question number 1, who am I? I wanted to know who I was, and I didn't know. I was a lost soul. Number 2, how did I get here into this world? I know I was born, from my mother, but how did man get here on the planet Earth? Number 3 question was, what's my purpose for being here in life? It's got to be more than robbing people. There's got to be something more to life than this. So I was in depression. And number 3 was, what is my purpose in life? Number 4 was, is there life after death? Because I killed myself. I was going to kill myself. I was suicidal. I had 3 or 4 friends who had killed themselves. And I thought of ending my life because I didn't find, I had a hole in my soul. And I couldn't fill it. I didn't know how. I was empty inside. I was lost and dying. I was just going downhill. And yet I had all the money, but I didn't have happiness, peace, and joy in my heart. So I'm going down this wrong road. And then as I was seeking, I went back and I bought my mother and father's farm from them to try to straighten my life out, because my life was a mess now. And I didn't know how to straighten it out. And so I ended up, I was seconds away from pulling the trigger, and God intervened. And a guy drove into my yard and pulled right up beside me. And I was just about to open the door and go in and get my gun and kill myself. And this car pulled up right beside me and asked me where my neighbor lived. And it broke my thought concentration. And I told him, and then I thought, I'm almost killed myself. I'm seconds away. I just was going to do that. So that was a divine intervention for me. And maybe some of your listening audience, maybe some of them are struggling with depression, or maybe have some questions like that. Who am I? Or why am I here? Or how did I get here? Or what's my purpose in life? Or how do I find my purpose? I can help a person. I can help your listening audience right now find their purpose in life in 5 minutes. Very easy. All they have to do is look inside themselves and ask themselves, what is my God-given talents, skills, abilities, and what I really enjoy doing? And you find out what you really enjoy doing and your talents and your skills, and that will reveal to you what your purpose is, because we all have a purpose for being here, more than just working 40 hours a week for 40 years and then die.
We do.
So, so
fantastic.
Yes.
We gotta stop and take a break and take a breath, Brian. That was like a roller coaster ride of information, man. You have some life story, dear partner. So we're gonna take a break on Andy's personal development in the breakout room, live with our guest Brian L. Arnold. We will be right back. Don't go away. Stand by for this commercial break. Okay, we are live back in the breakout room on Andy's personal development with our special guest, Brian L. Arnold. Brian, what does the L stand for?
Leonard.
I would have
That's
never
my
guessed.
middle. Yeah, it's just my middle initial, but I also call it Lifesaver.
Hey, that's interesting.
Because that's what I want to do is save lives, and I save lives by sharing the good news that just because you're going through depression and maybe suicidal, I have some very good news. You don't have to go that way. I went that way, and I was seconds away from ending my life, but then I got my life turned around, and it's been 45 years now that I have been asking, seeking, and knocking to find out the way to walk in life where we can overcome all our obstacles and solve all of our problems through understanding the two kingdoms.
Okay, great.
When we understand these two kingdoms, the kingdom of darkness and the kingdom of light, we get out of the kingdom of darkness, because the word darkness means ignorance and error. So we don't want to be in ignorance and error. We don't want to operate in that kingdom of darkness, but we're born into it.
Yeah.
And we want to get out of that and get over into knowledge, wisdom, and understanding in the kingdom of light.
Right. I hear you.
Yeah.
So that book that you wrote, How to Win the War Within and Discover Your Purpose for Living.
Yes.
I want to know, one, what prompted you to get writing, and two, what is the big message that you wanted to get to people from the publication?
Yes. Okay, so I've been writing, I've only got a grade 8 education, but I know that 9/8 is 72, 6/8 is 48, 9/9 is 81. I can rattle those off because I know my numbers very well.
Okay.
And I started writing as soon as I had this amazing transformation begin in my life, and I was suicidal and was going to end my life, and then somebody pointed out to me, you can come out of darkness and into the light. And so I accepted the Lord into my life, and that's what started and transformed my life. And I started to read again, and then I started to write, and I wanted to write the book, How to Win the War Within and Discover Your Purpose for Living. And I had a war still going on inside of me. And I used this analogy of an old Indian fella. His name was Harry. It's a story that this other Indian friend of his came to him one day and said, Harry, how are you doing? Harry said, oh, some days I'm up, some days down. I have a war going on inside of me. Yeah. And he said, what do you mean, Harry? And he said, I just have like this black dog and a white dog, and they're fighting inside of me all the time. And he said, well, which dog is winning? He said, well, whichever one I feed the most.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so we have a war going on inside of us. It's the kingdom of darkness and the kingdom of light. Good, the knowledge of good and evil are at war on the inside of us. And if we watch more television than we read things that are good for us, like for me, it's the scriptures, but for anybody else, whatever they want, whatever route they're going. But we need to know that there's war going on the inside of us, and we have what I call the universal mind, the conscious mind, and your subconscious mind. So the conscious mind, the subconscious mind, and the universal all-knowing mind, which is God. Okay. And when we feed inside of us this war that's going on the inside of us, how to win the war within and discover your purpose for living. Well, when we discover our purpose, all of a sudden I have a reason to get up in the morning. I had a
Right.
reason this morning to get up, was because I could be on the show here with you and talk to your
Right.
listeners, and I could share a bit of my story and give somebody hope that,
Yeah.
if they're in hopelessness or they're in darkness or they're depressed or they're suicidal, we don't know. I mean, I was shocked the other day. There's this beautiful young lady who's very popular here in America, and she jumped off of a 28-story building, and she was
Yeah.
27
Yeah.
years old.
Yeah.
Killed
Yeah.
herself.
Wow.
Like,
Yeah.
we don't know who's listening right now, and I got good news for you. You don't have to do that. There's lots of
That's
good
right.
things for us that can come on the inside of us and transform us and give us purpose on the inside, and that's what I live for today, is my purpose for living, and that's why I wrote that little book and
Great.
just
Great.
created. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thanks for sharing. I appreciate and I
Yes.
applaud you for the effort that you made to share that information in a publication form.
Yes. And I have a new one now just coming out that we've just created, and it's a very powerful life changer, and I call it the Life Saver napkin presentation. And I present this life-saving kingdoms within us that can be shared in a very simple, quick manner.
Apologize, and
Andy?
I'm sorry for that. Yeah, that's all right.
No, I'm fine.
It really happens. It really happens.
I'm cool, brother. I'm cool.
That's good. That's good to know. Right. So you were talking.
Well, now we get a little. Now you get a little chance to edit a little bit, maybe.
Yeah. We'll see how it goes.
But I'm fine.
Yeah. Okay. Great.
Yeah.
I wanted to get to know about KPS Prison Ministry and
Yes.
what inspired that and how it began and what impact has it been making on the lives of inmates.
Yes. Well, it's been really good, Andy. What inspired it was about, I guess 4 or 5 years ago. I didn't know what to do. I didn't, all we all have is our gifts and talents. You're using gifting and your talents right now to bring podcasts and to reach people and help people and so on. That's your gifting and calling. For me, I didn't know what to do because I didn't really have very much, but it was interesting because God told Moses, take your staff and you can cross the Red Sea with point the staff there and it parted the waters, or he struck the staff into the rock and the water came out. Okay. So it was like, and I heard somebody say one time, you have to use whatever's in your hand. Well, I didn't have very much in my hand, but I had these cards but I never picked the cards up. When I accepted the Lord into my life, instantly that moment, that day, I took my cards and I threw them in the garbage, and I walked away from $1 million a year and said, I'll never pick the cards up again. Not because the cards are evil, but my heart was evil. It wasn't the cards that were evil, it was my heart, and my thinking was wrong. And so all I knew how to do was, when I looked back on that, I said, well, I know how to work with cards, but what do I do with a deck of cards? And then I thought to myself, maybe I could write on little cards and, play with cards, and people could use the cards I could get a message across to them somehow in these little cards. So I started writing cards, and I wrote, I got 52 cards in a deck, and there's 52 weeks in a year. So you could read one card a week and memorize it. And in 1 year, you would know a lot from what I've written on these cards. So I started just writing the cards, but I never thought to turn the cards into actual playing cards. I just wrote them on little cards that were the size of a playing card. And I presented it to some of my friends, and they said, well, why don't you make it into playing cards? I thought, so you mean we could just play cards and there'd be writing on it? maybe I'll do that. So I started thinking about that, and I started to wrestle in my heart about it. Should I write scriptures on cards? People will think cards are evil, but they're not.
Yeah.
And it says we are to overcome evil with good.
Yeah.
Yes. So I thought, well, if I put scriptures on cards, that'll overcome evil with good.
Right.
And the evil is really in our minds and our hearts, and not in the cards, the same as there's no evil in a gun. A gun is just sitting there, but if a person has a wicked, evil heart, they could kill somebody with it. The gun won't kill somebody, but you do. So the wickedness and evil was in our hearts. I had to overcome all of that in my thinking. But then I started, and I started with, I did the Kingdom of God presentation, 52 cards. Then I did the Holy Spirit 52 cards. Then I did personal self-discovery, how to know who you are, why you're here, how you got here, spirit, soul, and body, what your soul is, how your body functions, your mind, emotions, and will, what they are, how they all work. So I started putting all that into cards. So now we're playing cards with these cards, and we're getting good response. So one day I went to the prison, and I met with the prison chaplain. And I talked with the prison chaplain, and I presented this, and I just left them 3 decks to look through. Well, a week later, he called me back, and he said, I want to have lunch. I want to talk to you about this. So I went back, and we met, and we started talking about it. And he goes, well, we would like 3,000 decks for 3,000 inmates here in this prison. And then I had a good chance of being able to connect with other prisons and creating all of that. And we could get 2 million, there's 2.1 million prison inmates in America. Right. So, there's a good possibility of 2.1 million decks of cards that could go into there, but we can't proselytize and try to convert anyone. So we have to have the deck built this way. So I changed a whole bunch of stuff, and that's how I ended up starting to get into the prisons. And now it's an amazing thing. We've got testimonials coming out from people who have been using these cards, and you can go on to my website and find them on my website as well. But that's really opening up. I've got a lot more work to do. I'm just working on 3 or 4 different projects, but they're all coming together as one big project under one big canopy, and that's all coming together now. And so there's going to be a lot of material for support material that we can support people who want to go out and win the world and turn things around and spin things around to where we're overcoming evil with good. And that's where my heart is, and that's where I'm headed, and that's how it kind of came about.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
We just have 2 minutes to go again, Brian, before we wrap up. It has been an absorbing time that we've spent together. A lot of valuable information and personal testimony you have shared. I just want to notice, I'm very intrigued by this. If you had the opportunity to stand up on the world stage and say something to the world that would make an impact because of what you're seeing, the things that are happening in the world, what would you say to the people in the world, especially the leaders?
I would say that we need to solve problems.
Right.
We're here as problem solvers. That's why I call my ministry Kingdom Problem Solvers. And we can solve problems with the kingdom within our heart. So every solution to every problem that you're facing can be solved right here inside of you. But you need to know what road to go down, and go down the right road. Yeah, that's what I would say to anybody. And that's only in the kingdom of light can you do that. Kingdom of darkness, ignorance, and error results in lack, limitation, and poverty. And I'd rather live in abundance in the kingdom of light than live in poverty in the kingdom of darkness.
Well said. That's a powerful note to end.
I'd like to, maybe if I could, I would just like to leave my phone number. If anyone needs help, they can call me at 406-241-8255. 230-6343. They can text me or email me at 100safeandsecure@gmail.com. Thank you, Andy. It's been great. Thank you very much.